All right. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to King County Recovery Conversations. My name is Christopher Archiopoli. My pronouns are he, him, his. I want to thank Orbit Audio, King County Recovery Coalition, and King County Behavioral Health and Recovery Division for allowing us to be here today. And I'd like to welcome my guest, my dear friend, Robin Held. So grateful for her to be here and to have her to share her story and talk about the work that she does in the community. Robin and I have known here, I was trying to think of this last night, like 5 or 6 years at least. I know it was pre-COVID, so like I feel like it was
I
like,
know, and we don't always remember what,
yeah, because that feels like
pre-pandemic.
a whole
I'm
different
gonna say
lifetime ago.
10.
It may be. I mean, I think like, because we have our mutual friend Felicia who introduced us. And so I think there was like some adjacent stuff that happened before, because I started doing your hair. That's really how I got to know
Yeah.
you. And I think there was a couple times, like I may have met you a couple times before you officially trusted me to do your hair, because that's always a leap of faith.
Oh, well, it was falling out because I
which
had a Cruella de Vil kind of thing going on, and
there was a chemical situation that I did not cause.
No.
But I think, yeah, many people can relate to the grief and recovery of bad hair also. That's something that I know I've had. So, but yeah, I mean, I've been grateful to get to know you over the years of, this sort of like casual mutual friendship to doing your hair. But, over the course of doing your hair, getting to know you better and then developing a relationship with you outside of the salon chair.
Yeah.
And
Friends,
learning,
colleagues.
yeah, all the things. I mean, we have so many layers to our relationship and, figuring out over time what we had in common and these beautiful bonds and, taking walks with our dogs and taking them to the park and, sharing in highs and lows. So, but that's my love for you. And, I wanted to give you an opportunity to, you will introduce yourself far better than I could ever introduce you. So, if you want to share a little bit about yourself, your recovery story, your personal story, whatever you're comfortable with of sharing with the audience.
I'm a grief coach, and I've reinvented myself a number of times, like many of us have, and I think there are some roles you seek and then some roles that find you. And becoming a grief coach was a calling that found me. And so I did many things before this role, but I became a certified grief coach. I can say what that means. About 5 years ago, and it's very rewarding work that is so deeply personal and meaningful and transformative for the coach and the client. And I have seen extraordinary change in people because whether your cumulative grief, like all the grief that leads up till now, or one big bomb of grief, you are changed. You are changed, and you are a very different person creating yourself anew. And so that's the work I'm doing now.
Yeah, and I remember when because I think when we met, you were working for, was it the Washington State University? Was that where you were working, I think, at the time?
So for a very long time, I worked in institutions. I worked in arts institutions. I worked in museums. And I was chief curator. I was director of collections and exhibitions. I was executive director in museums. Very rewarding, very creative work with a lot of autonomy. But you are still an employee, and you are still working for structures that are much bigger than you. You can make change, and I was often hired to make change. The through line I would name is that, and I hope this doesn't sound too esoteric. The through line I would name is that I have always worked directly with artists, creating something new, and creating something new that didn't exist before might not have words yet. It might not have shape yet. It only has self-trust. It really only has self-trust, but it's a shift in identity. It's a shift in not just doing, but being. And I think the skills and talents that made me very trusted and successful with artists is what makes me a really good grief coach, helping people begin to trust themselves again and that they are the best guide in their own grief.
Yeah, that's an interest. I've never heard you put it that way. Mm-hmm. That's a really interesting comparison and sort of through line that you established there, and not too esoteric at all. Mm-hmm. I love it. Mm-hmm. But I remember you being just thinking how cool it was when you were making this big shift, mm-hmm. And thinking like, how does that takes like some. I hate when people call it bravery or courage, but that does take some bravery to be able to say like, hey, this is what I've done my entire life, and now I'm going to go do something different. And what's even cooler is it was not only am I going to go do something different, I'm going to go help people. And I think that that's really amazing. And it's one of the things I love about you. You talked about, you said you were going to talk about what it means to be certified as a grief coach and kind of what grief coaching is. So I'd love to hear you define that a little bit better for folks.
So I was just thinking about what you were saying, and there's just a point, there's something that happens in your life where you decide how you want to spend your days. And I decided at a certain point that I had skills and talents I hadn't used and that I wasn't using, armored up for institutional change. And 95% of the museums in the world shut down. And I mean, there are a lot of things that came together. Okay. So when I decided that I wanted to do something different, I had a whole grief storm in my life with several moving parts that just really knocked me to my knees. I could name any one of those. But I got a lot of help for what was very traumatic. I got help in Seattle for what was traumatic. Mm-hmm. And I'll name I got the initial help that I got that was foundational for me was at Jewish Family Services. I had an excellent therapist who was a recovery coach. Jewish Family Services also had a food bank and had a domestic violence support group. And all those were available to me. And in that mix of services, I was receiving support that I knew I needed. And then I saw other kinds of support I didn't know I needed, right? So I got real support for the trauma and for my physical and emotional safety, but there was just still such a big hole. I was gutted. And I didn't know what I needed. And I'll just add an asterisk here that then my sobriety journey was really linked to this because I alcohol was what I was really using to make it okay, numb myself enough, be small enough to be able to stay. And then I learned with the support of my therapist that it was also numbing me to the physical danger I was in. Okay, so there's a bit of the trauma piece. As I moved forward and I started thinking about what I want to do, I thought I started to learn about modalities that were specific to grief. And very few therapists have them. Very few counselors have them. And that, if I were to add an asterisk here, I would say that I would name the difference between a coach, a therapist, and a counselor. They each have different trainings. They can be really mutually supportive. A coach is action-oriented. And in grief, I know I'm coming back and forth between the big story and the little story, but
You'll weave it together.
The biggest myth I think there is in grief is the idea that time will heal. Time will heal all wounds. But time is time, and time really shifts when you're in grief, but it's the actions you take in time.
Mm-hmm.
So if you decide to live and you decide to move forward, there are actions you can take to stay present, to not numb out, and actions to help you live your life again. It won't be the same life. And to integrate your grief and grow around your grief. And that's what a grief coach can help you do. The actions, when you take those actions with a coach, it provides evidence for your brain that your pain is not permanent and that change is possible. So even when you default to, I will always feel this awful, I can never get off the floor, you have evidence for that time you work with a coach that you can return to, and evidence for your mind and your body that change is possible and that this isn't a permanent painful state. Yeah.
And as a coach that helps people through grief, how has that helped you to work through your own?
Oh, every day. Every single day. I learn from my clients. I learn usually the only times I share parts of my story is in service to their healing, but I learn from them every day. And there are a few things that I would love to name that I think if we all knew the things I'm going to say, we would be so much kinder to each other in our grief. So the first thing I would say is that grief is not limited to a loss by death. It's the natural and normal response to any kind of loss. First of all, natural and normal. Second, your grief is as unique as your fingerprint. And I don't mean that in a woo-woo way. I mean that because your physiology, your psychology, your trauma history, your relationships, they are all yours, right? And they are different than mine. Therefore, even if we were siblings, or if we were partners, or if we were parent and child, your grief would always be different than mine. And neither is wrong. So our grief is as unique to each of us as our fingerprint. Everybody will need something different in their grief, even if we've shared the same grief event, right? Same loss. And if we know that, rather than judging that you're doing it wrong because you're not crying, or you're doing it wrong because you're crying too much, or it's going on too long for me, right? If we just let go, or whatever, time's up, I don't know. Like, we would be so much kinder to each other, and we wouldn't say such hurtful, well-meaning but hurtful things to each other. And so let me add one additional thing and flip it to the people who support grieving people, all of us, because we all want to. And it's the holiday season. It's also Grief Awareness Week. So often we are uncomfortable with our person being in pain. And so we want to fix it. We don't want them to be in pain. We're also really uncomfortable with our own, we can't fix it, right? So we're uncomfortable. The very best thing you can do for someone that you love who's in grief is just be with them and let them feel the pain. Because if you try and fix it, you try and advise, you try to bright side them. Oh, at least it wasn't that bad, or at least you had your partner for that long, or whatever thing you say, whatever platitude you use, you haven't helped. You've actually made the person feel worse. And another thing that's going to break your heart as someone trying to help is that what you've just shown them is that you are not the person they can trust. And so then they're not going to come to you with their most vulnerable states. Yeah.
And so, I mean, people do not like to be uncomfortable. And people are looking for the right thing to say.
Yes.
And, I heard you say, the right thing is maybe just to be there in that uncomfortable silence with somebody, for the person that's trying to be the support, be the comfort. Are there right things that they could say if they can't sit with the discomfort for forever? And I know that's sort of counter to even the point you were trying to make, but
it's a practice to become comfortable with your own discomfort, right? With someone's pain. Saying nothing is okay. If you want to say something that's helpful, you can say things like, I'm here for you. That sounds so hard, my friend. What would you like to share with me? Right? I don't know what to say, but I'm right here. Right? It's not so helpful to ask someone what you can do for them, because the person is usually in a state that they don't know what they need, and what they need now might be different 5 minutes from now, 2 days from now. But you keep checking in, and you keep acknowledging that this thing that is really, really painful for them is actually as painful as they say it is, right? Is there a story you want to tell me about your person, right? Or should we take a walk? You don't have to pick at it all the time, but you're kind of taking the cues from your grieving person. Some of the worst things to say, there's a reason. Everything has a reason. God needed an angel. At least you had your person for as long as you did. Oh, she was 95. Well, then.
Yeah.
Or she wouldn't want you to be sad. Well, what do you know? Or I promise it gets better. Well, you can't promise it's going to get better. None of these things are things you know. So really all you can do is be with the person in the pain they're in the present that they're in. Coaching's different than that, but this is the way we can make a cocoon of support around our grieving people.
And that is really difficult because we do default to a lot of, I mean, I think I've said some of the things that
Me
you
too.
just said, because it is this sort of default action that we want to fill space, that we want to not only make the person feel comfortable, but also make ourselves feel
Mhm.
comfortable.
I
So
think
if,
I would add, just as long as it's about them and it's not about you.
right.
Like turning this, hey, have you tried acupuncture? Or when my aunt had cancer,
Hmm.
or something that is about, or I think even, I think this isn't a gray zone, but I'm so sorry for your loss keeps us both in the picture,
Hmm.
as long as you don't follow up with some story about you.
Yeah.
The whole point is keeping it on the person who needs your support and not making it about you.
Yeah. And that's,
Yeah.
we are in a very self-centered society, and
Hmm. Yeah.
that is, the default, I think,
Yeah.
a lot. One thing that I was thinking about when you were talking is, when somebody's grieving, oftentimes they will isolate and they will pull back, even when they need support.
Hmm.
If someone's trying to support somebody through grief, how do you know that balance between giving somebody the space they need, but also not letting them isolate in a
Yeah.
dangerous way? And I think that's a very tender balance, and probably is not the same for every person, but
Right.
how would you gauge that?
I try, and this is talking as a friend, not talking with me as a coach with a client.
Yeah.
If I mean, I think seeking support is strength. It's not weakness to seek support. To seek support means that you realize you need some new tools. You need something external to you to and that you deserve support, right? Because your heart's broken. It's not that you're broken, right? In terms of checking in with a loved one, I will often just say, I'm thinking about you. I'll text or I'll let someone know. This is not people in the same household. That's a different dynamic.
Hmm.
I do think that if I'll use a parent and a child or two partners as an example, I think one of the best things you can do for all your relationships is seek support for your grief, because the healing your own grief, the ripple effects of that on every relationship you have are profound. Modeling for partners, modeling for families, modeling for children. I will often say, I'm thinking about you. I'm thinking about you and your mom today. I know this is the anniversary of, I know this might be a hard day for you. Do you want to take a walk? Do you want, sometimes it's, especially around big events, if I know somebody's got something that they have to deal with, I'll often say, if you need somebody to come with you and redirect, right? Or get you out of there, or if you want to walk after to decompress, I just offer up a lot of things and see what lands. Um, can I cook you dinner? Can I cook you dinner now? Okay, how about later? And you become the person that they can trust.
Yeah. And trust is earned. And
Trust is earned. And your relationships change in surprising ways when you're grieving because of the discomfort we're talking about. Some people move away, move away from you. Some people don't know how to be with you when you're not happy, don't know how to, there's not space for you in your new uncertainty. And some people are harmful,
mhm.
and they're not your people who were trusted before may not be your new trusted people. And sometimes the most trusted people are strangers that you just met because you joined a grief group, or someone who understands, has something parallel to your experience and knows how hard it is.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I've thought about that, with friends and acquaintances, how different people serve different purposes. And,
Hmm.
there's some people that, are great in a crisis and may not even be your best friends, but they're the people that show up in those times.
Yes.
And, I have those friends where like I will not talk to them for
Yeah.
years. And then, like in the crisis, they're there. And
Yes.
then we don't, and then once the crisis is over, we maybe don't talk to each other again
Yeah.
or, it goes back to the, very casual sort of acquaintance type
Hmm.
relationship. And I imagine that it's that way in grief as well.
Hmm.
You were talking about how you support people as a friend. How does that differ if you're supporting somebody as a coach?
Mm.
Because even though they're paying you, they may still be reluctant to share. They may cancel appointments. They may,
Yeah.
I
So
imagine there's still that process of pulling
so
away
there
sometimes.
there I in my private coaching. So I'm starting tomorrow. I'm teaching a group course on navigating grief in the holiday season. So I have group offerings, and you and I were close during a time when I was doing live coaching, grief coaching,
Mhm.
right? For groups. Set period of time, closed group, so the relationships and bonds can happen within a group too, support kind of group. One-on-one, I do a free consult with people to understand where they are and what is most urgent for them. And then we start at one of three places. I do something very structured, like an 8-week structured program. And the structure helps calm your mind. And we go through some very specific things about who you are, what your grief history is, the place that this big event that brought you to me, how that fits, things like that. The other two junctures that I help people most at in the private coaching is when someone is at a point where they're just starting to grow around their grief
Mhm.
and beginning to think about what their life will look like in the short term, trying to beyond being flattened by a loss, but thinking about what I want next. And then the third area that I help people with is grief changes you in many ways. And one of the ways that it changes you is you may want to negotiate an important relationship. And so whether it's finding a job that's a better fit for your values, whether it's I'm going to renegotiate this relationship, I'm going to get a divorce, I'm going to have that really hard conversation. All those things I help people negotiate, prepare for win-win negotiations. Yeah.
I've got one more sort of topic that I want to
Yeah.
touch on, and it's kind of a big one, but I think it's a good way to kind of close out
Mhm.
because I think it's relevant to where we're at right now, and we're in kind of like two seasons of grief right now. The holidays every year can be really hard for people.
Yes.
They are a time of joy for many people, but for a great percentage of our society, they also are a time of grief. And then we're also dealing with a shift in political winds
Yes.
that, has, put a profound grief on a lot of people,
Yes.
including myself.
Yes.
And it's not just because people tell us that it's not real doesn't make it any less real.
That's right.
And so I'm curious how you can take those as one thing or two addressing them, but how are you dealing with that, both personally, but also in supporting others right now around the holidays and around the election and the change in politics?
Where I'll start is that this was a very difficult Thanksgiving for lots and lots of people because really hard conversations had to be had about a consequential election where so much harm could come to people in the same family, right? And there's such divided ideas about what is possible, right? And there's so many unknowns, and there's a lot of fear. And then you have the holidays, and then you have the unknown, you have the threats, and you have the unknowns of what comes next. And we can talk about those in lots of different ways. Where what I see that is very, the thing I will name that is about personal loss and is about agency and self-trust and moving through fear and unknowns, like we're talking about, and remaining active and not staying in the fight and flight place, is that when something really bad has happened, we tend to catastrophize and we wait for the other shoe to drop, right? So we wait for the next bad thing, and then we anticipate the next bad thing, and it keeps us from our self-trust that we will continue to have our access, we will continue to take actions for our well-being and the well-being of our communities, right? But it starts with a kind of self-trust and the bonds we have with each other.
Yeah, and I know that I find that really hard right now because, in a lot of ways, I don't trust a lot of people. I trust the people that are in my circle.
That's right.
But, for me, this time has really shown me that there are many, many people that I can't trust.
That's right.
And won't be able to trust. And I'm still, I guess I'm in a grieving process. And that's partially why I wanted to talk about this with you, not to get your coaching, but, to have a conversation with a friend.
This is our collective grief right now.
Yeah, because there are things that, we don't even know what we're going to lose, but we know we're losing something. We've lost an election.
We know what's been campaigned. We know what has been promised, and
and even if a small percentage of that could be quite impactful and damaging for us in our lifetimes.
Yes.
I mean, it really...
Our lifetime and beyond.
We're not talking about 4 years. We're talking about the rest of our lives.
Yes.
And that really is... It causes grief.
Yes.
And I know for myself, I'm trying to sit with that and move through that and allow myself to feel those things because I don't know what to feel yet. And I don't know how I want to respond. And I don't know, you talked about, grief sort of creates a new version of you. And I don't know what that version of me is going to be for the next 4+ years. And I'm not ready to decide to come out of that cocoon just yet.
I understand what you're saying. And also from what I know about you and I know about me, our work is the same. Our work is the same. It may change shape. It may evolve. It may be smaller or bigger or focused on different concentric circles, right? But our core beliefs and the future we are moving toward beyond all of us remains the same. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yeah, and we have each other.
And we have each other.
We have the people in our community that we, have turned to and continue to turn to. So.
I think what you're saying, though, is a super important part of this, though, to not move directly into action, but to rest and restore and calm your own nervous system before you can be generative and supportive of others.
Yeah, I think that's the process that I'm going through right now is, because nothing's going to happen until January 20th anyway. So I've got at least that long to process and think about what's next for myself.
And get things in order for you.
Exactly.
Get some things in order for you. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's sort of the end of our time, but I want to give you an opportunity real quick to tell people where to find you. So, you have your coaching services, you have your course that you're offering. If somebody wanted to connect with you, how would they do that?
So I'm Robin Held Grief Coach. So you can find Robin Held Grief Coach, the website, with lots of free resources, or a call to see if grief coaching is right for you. There's lots of things there. On Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and all the things, I'm either Robin Held or I'm Robin Held Grief Coach, so you can find me there. I have a blog on the website too. It's called Hearts Held Well. So there are free resources. There are mini courses that are available to do it yourself, which is kind of how, I don't know, we're all a little more comfortable. Group offerings, and then the private coaching, which is the most effective because it gets at what is specifically urgent for you. Right.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for being here.
Oh, friend, it was so nice to be with you.
Every moment with you is a joy, but
always.
being able to share this with you and being able to share you with everybody who's listening and watching, is a real joy for me. So I think I was mentioning to you before we started, I was walking here and thinking like, God, this is so cool that I get to do this and that I get to share it with people that I love. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. And thank you for trusting me and for allowing me to share some things that are important to both of us.
I knew you'd be great.
Okay, thanks.
So, well, thank you again to King County Recovery Coalition, King County Behavioral Health and Recovery Division, and Orbit Audio for hosting King County Recovery Conversations. And thank you, Robin Held.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.